Okay, good evening, everybody. Of course, we're now ready to read the last two parshot of Sefer Vayikra, Behar and Bechukosai. And as I've mentioned on a number of occasions, this, of course, is no accident or happenstance that these parshot that we read now come between Pesach and Shavuot. Pesach, of course, is the time of our physical liberation of the Jewish people. And then Shavuot, of course, it becomes actually the purpose for which we were liberated from Mitzrayim. But when we talk about the land of Eretz Yisrael, and all of these parshiot from Emor, Behar, Bechukosai, even a bit before, these parshiot deal with our responsibilities toward the land, but even of surpassing importance, our responsibilities toward our fellow Jews. And that will be hello? Okay. That is the focus of these parshiot. So I'll ask you then to turn to Parshat Behar. Behar, of course, has within it the primary mitzvot and the primary elements of the mitzvot of Shemitah and Yovel. Both of these two mitzvot are inextricably tied to Eretz Yisrael, the land of Eretz Yisrael. And as I mentioned last week, Rav Kook says that there's a common mistake that people make. We, even the most devout of Jews, often will say that the land of Eretz Yisrael belongs to the Jewish people. And Rav Kook said that's a mistake. The land of Eretz Yisrael, of course, like all the earth, belongs to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But even more important, the land of Eretz Yisrael is tied inextricably to the Jewish people. And the Jewish people is tied to the land of Eretz Yisrael. It's our relationship with Eretz Yisrael is not like a person to his possessions, but a person to his or her arm. We are organically tied. And the Torah stresses that idea here as to how we express that tie that we have to the land of Eretz Yisrael. That tie is expressed primarily through the way we treat our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael, those who are, if we're living in Eretz Yisrael, and even if we're not. So that will be a focus of tonight's shir. Turn please to Parshat Behar, Perek Chaf-Hei, Pasuk Lamed-Hei. Perek Chaf-Hei, Pasuk Lamed-Hei. The Torah tells us various different mitzvot that we have regarding the ownership of property within Eretz Yisrael. Again, we don't talk about the ownership of Eretz Yisrael, but the ownership of property within Eretz Yisrael, whether it's in a walled city or whether it's a field, whether it's in an unwalled city. And then the Torah tells us in Perek Chaf-Chet, Pasuk Lamed-Hei, the following. Perek Chaf-Hei. Perek Chaf-Hei, Pasuk Lamed-Hei. V'chi yamuch achicha umata yado rimach. Should your brother, that would be achicha, your brother, slip, umata yado, and his hand will fall, imach, while he's with you. Here is our response. Hechzakta bo. You have a responsibility to support him. Ger v'toshav v'cha imach. Whether he is a ger, a convert to Judaism, or whether he is a person born into Judaism, v'cha imach. Each Jew has a responsibility that every Jew can live, meaning to say not just live, to reside, but to live while in Israel. And the Torah tells us then in the next pasuk, Al tikach me'ito neshek v'tarbit, you may not take from him ribis, any form of interest when you loan him money, because after all, what's going to happen is if he's slipping, one of the things he certainly needs is not only your moral support, but your monetary support. You're entitled to get it back once he's on his feet, but you may not charge him ribis. You may not charge interest. And then the Torah tells us, the areta elokech, that you must be aware and fear God. Now, in the past, I've talked about the idea of what is yira from a Jewish standpoint. Yira, of course, we often say is fear, and that's true. But I believe in the day-to-day religious sense, the yira is not fear, but more like the Malbim seems to indicate, it is that you are to be aware of Hashem. We'll see how that plays itself out in Rashi in a moment. And then you have an obligation. Each of us as a Jew has an obligation to do what we can to support people who are impoverished in Eretz Yisrael and outside as well. Therefore, when people come to our door, they come from Eretz Yisrael. More often than not, they come from Eretz Yisrael. We have a responsibility. It's not my money. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu's money. I can earn a certain amount of money during the year because Hashem allows me to do that. And that is conditional that I realize that Meiser or whatever the amount is that I'm supposed to provide will be given. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a certain expectation of me that if, let's say, a person earns $50,000 a year, so the expectation is $5,000 is for tzedakah concerns. And then he goes, the pasuk goes further in pasuk Lamed Zayin, Perak Kafhei Lamed Zayin, et kaspacha lo titein lo b'neshek. You may not give your money with an agreement of neshech, which is interest. Another term for it, and there, of course, there are halachic differences between the two marbit. Lo titein ochlecha. And when it comes to you shall not give again a form of getting compensation beyond what you gave to the person as interest. I mean as a loan. Ani Hashem Elokechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Mitzrayim. V'ateit lachem et Eretz Canaan, and you have what was formerly called Eretz Canaan, liot lachem le'Elohim, and there you shall act with completely subjugating yourself to Hashem. Now let's go back to Rashi in Pasuk Lamed Hey. Torah tells us when a person ki yamuch achicha. The word much means to be lowered, go from a higher element to a lower one. That's how we get the word in Hebrew namoch, which means that someone is at a lowered status. And it's interesting, the Meforshim tell us that when a person was once at a higher status, and then due to whatever circumstances come about, they find themselves on a lower level. So that is more painful than having been born into poverty. Because a person who was born into poverty, that's pretty much, they accept that circumstance. Very often you'll hear people say, well, we didn't know we were poor. Everybody lives this way. That's true. But when a person, let's say, was on a higher economic plane, and then his fortunes turned, and now he's lower, that is even more painful for the person, even though he's not earning less than maybe his neighbor. But relative to what he had, now it's less. So that's what the word yamuch means, to go from a higher level to a lower level. Now, Rashi quotes on this pasuk, you must support him. If he's slipping, you have to grab him, so to speak, metaphorically. Al tanichehu sheyerei. Don't just allow him to continue his slide. V'yipol v'yeh kasher lahakimo. V'yipol v'yeh kasher lahakimo. If you let him slide too far, then it'll be infinitely harder to get him back to where he was. Ela chazkehu, says Rashi. You have to support him. Mishat mutat hayad. From the moment that you see that his ability, doesn't mean necessarily a hand, that it means his ability begins to slip. Don't wait till he completely collapses. V'mad zeh domes, says Rashi. The masui she'ala chamor. We have a donkey that is laden with a pretty heavy load, more usually than one person can lift at a time. So deu ala chamor echad tofes bo umamido. As long as when that load begins to fall, somebody stops it while it's still on the chamor, then you have a good chance to continue. Nafal la'aretz. But what happens if that load fell to the ground completely? Chamisha ein ma'amidim. 5 people can't lift it. And so what it means, of course, is that we have an obligation to see when people are in difficult straits and to stop them before their fall is complete. Now, obviously, you can't always control the circumstance, but we have to do what we can when we see that there are people who are undergoing very hard times. Someone loses his job, his health is declining. So we have obligations to try to help to mitigate the difficulty and the emotional as well as the physical pain that they may be undergoing. So let's take a look, and then Rashi concludes with the words "V'yarei me elokech." Lefi shedato shel adam nimshechet achar haribit. Now, Rashi is commenting here on the concept of Jews not taking or demanding ribis. Okay? So Rashi explains human psychology here. People like to keep, quote, their money. Not really their money. It's money which HaKadosh Baruch Hu has bestowed upon them from the beginning of the year to use properly. That doesn't mean a person can't buy things that they like. Doesn't mean that they can't spend some of the money on things that are that are for themselves. But it means that people like to think it's their money, and therefore, the kasher lifrosh himenu, and it's difficult to part with money. So if somebody needs it, your friend is slipping, and he can't seem to get on track. And somebody says, "Yeah, but says to himself, I worked hard for that money. I'm not going to loan it out to him." So therefore, the Torah says, "Okay, but you don't charge him ribis. You don't charge him interest." Rashi uses a very interesting phrase, "Umoreh la'atzmo heter." He paskins for himself. And usually when we paskin for ourselves and we are, shall we say, intimately connected to the problem, so I paskin a heter. Now I'm allowed to do that. It would be okay. So bishvil ma'otav, in order to preserve his money, shehayu betelot etzlo, that money is now not going to earn him any interest, and not going to earn him anything from his investment. Now, of course, Chazal tell us that one is permitted to really, the charging of interest is not an unethical act. Rabbi Yosheber Soloveitchik says that, others say it too. It's not, it's in and of itself, it is not an unethical act. So why does the Torah prohibit it? It's precisely because of the Torah's use of the term achicha, your brother, or it could be your father, your mother. Generally speaking, we don't charge the people closest to us, family, any interest. What would we charge? We could charge a neighbor. You could charge someone else interest, but not a Jew. But it in itself is not an act which is unethical. But we have a special responsibility to see each and every Jew as a brother or a sister. Just like we would be loath to charge interest to a brother or a sister, so that's what, or certainly to a parent. Therefore, that's the way we need to see other Jews. But we are allowed to charge non-Jewish people interest because there's nothing unethical. We can pay interest to non-Jewish people too. That's okay, because it's not, isn't in itself not an improper act. It's only improper when it comes to the relationship that comes between Jews. So the Torah tells us then, "V'yareita me'elokecha," you must be aware and have a certain degree of fear of God when it comes to this. And so therefore Rashi says, as he says in more than one place, this is something which is given only to the most intimate thoughts that a person has. He knows, she knows, whether they're acting properly or improperly. And of course, so does HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God knows our inner thoughts. You will find this phrase, you must fear or be aware of God when we deal with elements that other people can look at and not know whether it's bad or good. But the Torah tells us God knows whether it's bad or good. Therefore, we may not involve ourselves in charging in interest to another Jew. Now, we have a Medrash Rabbah. Medrash Rabbah quotes actually comments on this pasuk. Very interesting Medrash. It's Vayikra Rabbah, and it says as follows: "L'chi yamuch achicha." Should your brother slip? The Medrash asks, "The lama Moshe mitzaveh et Yisrael kach." What is the purpose of this this mitzvah placement here? The Medrash says, "Hadahu dichsiv." This is why it's written, "Gomel nasho ish chased ve'ocher she'ero achzari." Now, this is actually taken from pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Yud Aleph, pasuk Yud Zayin. In its simple sense, it talks about it is a pasuk which tells people what to do in their best interest. Gomel nafsho ish chased. If a person does chesed, so he is actually not just doing chesed for someone else, he's actually doing it for himself. And that's okay. In other words, you are the winner when you do chesed for someone else, even if it costs you time or if it costs you money. And then, but if a person is cruel, they see another human being, particularly another Jew, suffering, and they just hear the word ocher. Here the word ocher she'ero means that he muddies or he sort of just passes by if a person is cruel, so he muddies or makes difficult himself. who is the loser? When a person is uncaring about others, the person who is uncaring himself is the loser. So, however, the Medrash tells us that this pasuk in Mishlei is actually talking about something else. And it says as follows: Gomel nafsho ish chesed, a person who extends kindness to another, right? He, now it's Gomel nafsho, he extends kindness to another person. But the person who, I guess we could say, ignores his own blood. She'ero means to say his own flesh and blood, his relatives. Achsari, that person is cruel. Now here's what the Medrash says. Omer Rabbi Alexander, Ze shemagat lo simcha. Simcha comes up in your life. It's a happy period of time, and so you invite people to chasna. You invite people to whatever simcha you have. So Ze shemagat lo simcha. Eino madbik et krovav imo. Chooses not to invite his relatives to the simcha. But it's not that the issue isn't I don't have enough money. Listen to what the issue is. Mishum aniyut. Because they are poor. And v'shehem aniyim mitbayesh. He's embarrassed by them. And so he'll invite the person down the block, but he won't invite his own flesh and blood. Why? Because look at that, he doesn't dress well, and he's poor, and he has no status, no situation. So the Medrash says that on this pasuk, this person now has a lowered economic status, and therefore that extends to the social status. He says, I'm not going to invite him to the wedding. I'm not going to invite him to the bar mitzvah. So when a person does it because he then becomes embarrassed, so the pasuk, the Medrash says, such a person is ocher she'ero achsari. He's considered to be a cruel human being. And Omer of Nachman says about this, the pasuk, he says, ki beglal hadavar hazeh. In Devarim, in Perek Tetvav, it talks about, again, this very issue of extending chesed to the poor people. And the Torah then concludes there, and it says, Ki biglal hadavar hazeh, precisely because of this matter, meaning to say, you're being concerned for the welfare of even the impoverished person, I brought you out of Mitzrayim. That's why I brought you here. And then the Medrash says, a play on words, Galgalhu chozer ba'olam. Biglal usually means, it's a causative word, because of this. Meaning to say, because of your opportunity and to give you the opportunity to care for the indigent, from the poor. So Rav Nachman says it's not just biglal in that sense, but it's bigalgal. To know that poverty and wealth is not up to you. It's a chesed from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, people who are wealthy to be able to share. And you don't have to be wealthy to be able to share. But if you have more than only your daily bread, so it's an opportunity for you. So therefore, Rav Nachman says, by giving to the poor people, ki biglal hadavar hazeh, you need to know that it is precisely to make other people happy. That's why you're out of Mitzrayim. That's why you have wealth. You should know the word biglal easily turns into the concept of galgal, the wheel of fortune and misfortune goes around. And one never knows, and one cannot account for the fact that they are wealthy and someone else who invested as much as they could as well of their energy and time didn't make it. So this is the concept that we have in this week's Sedra about caring for people who are indigent, less fortunate, And they are called, with this will conclude, they are called achim, brothers. And Yoshe Bar Soloveitchik says that Jews can be called re'im, or they can be called achim. Re'im, says Rabbi Yoshe Bar, is a relationship between myself and the people who are around me. And re'im ahuvim, re'im is in itself, the person has his status, but there are limits to what I have to do for that person. Yes, I have to give tzedakah if they're poor, etc. But the obligations that I have for an ach, for a sibling, for a brother, for a sister, certainly for parents, right? That is a much higher bar that we have to reach in terms of our chesed. So therefore, the Torah doesn't say ki yamuch re'echa. No, that's true. You have to worry about them. You definitely have to worry about them. But a special concern you have to have primarily for your own family and for Jews who are now not just the status of re'im, people that you know and care about, but achim. They are your brothers and sisters. And that idea that we have in this parsha, of course, has carried us all the way through Jewish history, where we realize our obligation to take care of every Jew to the degree that we can. And that's why we have so many magnificent gamachim and organizations that are designed to help people who are going through a rough patch in life. All right, so Emir Tashem, I wish everybody a good Shabbos. We will meet again next week, with Hashem's help, on Wednesday through Zoom, and then I'll announce then, and you can see in the Ken's bulletin when we'll be ceasing for a couple of weeks and when we'll resume. Okay, everyone, have a great evening, and I wish you a good Shabbos.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
And Toda Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi Myers.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay, good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good Shabbos.
Okay, good Shabbos.